Welcome back to another episode of the Development by David podcast. This week, your sponsor is me. If you wish to help caffeinate this podcast, then you can use the link in my bio at buymeacoffee.com to supply me with a coffee, or two, or three, depends how generous you feel. This podcast takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, and that's supplied by my caffeine intake. And if you wish to support the podcast, then please donate me a coffee. Okay, let's just get into it. I've hit record. Let's just go for it.
Amazing, let's do it.
Cool. Max Fosh, welcome to the Development by David podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, matey. How are you? I like the jumper, although it's not helpful for an audio-based podcast, but a very nice jumper being worn by David today.
We'll leave it open to interpretation. The listeners can guess what it looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
So, mate, I know I've not got you for long. I love that you've agreed to this. Like I said to you in our email, my sister now finds me cool and she might tune into my podcast because she's a mega fan. She compares my voice to that of her iPhone alarm clock in the morning. So this is such a huge compliment that she's going to tune into this one.
Okay, well, hello. What's your sister called?
She's called Freya.
Hello, Freya. Thank you very much for listening to the pod. I mean, I can't believe it's taking me to force you to listen to David's pod, but Freya, welcome. I'm sure there's loads of other episodes that you're going to enjoy.
My opening line on the podcast is always the exact same, not because I'm too lazy to do research or recording an intro for it, but I love to see how guests introduce themselves in the way that they kind of see themselves in the mirror in the morning, instead of me just saying Max Fosh, the YouTuber. So if I were to ask, who is Max Fosh today in 2022? How would you describe yourself?
It's funny that I actually change and edit my answer depending on who I'm talking to. So I was actually with some of my my dad's friends at the weekend. We were watching the rugby, and I introduced myself as a comedian, which was quite odd for them. I mean, that's mainly because the person I was talking to was in their late 50s. But no, most of the time I'd say I'm a YouTuber. I would just say that I am a YouTuber. It's what I do. It's what I get up for in the morning and do on a daily basis. So I think that I'm a YouTuber or content creator, if I want to sound a little bit more professional, because I think that YouTuber has slightly negative connotations, I think, which is for a weird reason. I'm not massively sure why.
I typically use my podcast as a platform to use origin stories as a self-development tool. If I were to ask you, where did it all begin for Max Fosh? How would you outlay that?
God, I mean, what, from a YouTube point of view or just as to who I am?
Both.
I think from a YouTube point of view, I just decided that one day I was going to film the stupid stuff that I did. I've always been doing this as long as I can remember, really. I mean, I remember when I was at university, one of the first things I ever did was not a great way. I'm just going to say this isn't a great way to ingratiate yourself with your new fellow university students. But I remember one night I was in and I realized that my desk was exactly the same width as the lift in my accommodation. And so at like midnight, I didn't go out. I decided that I was going to put my desk and all of my books, all my plants, my laptop, everything in the lift. And so that when people were coming back from nights out, the doors would open and there'd just be me working at my desk in the lift. And I'd look around at them and be like, what are you doing? Get out of my room. And so I became known as just lift boy at university for a while, which was quite funny. And so I was always kind of doing silly, stupid things like this. And then it wasn't until like 2017 when I decided to film it, because I previously had done about 3 years of radio work as well. I'd been on hospital radio for about 3 years, just learning about telling stories and interacting with audiences. And it wasn't until 2017 where I thought, I might as well just film a silly idea, which is exactly what I did, and it's how I got started. So I think my origin story when it comes to work is just been, I just press record for the weird things that I was doing. So I think that's where that comes from. And as to who I am, I think I've always had a lot of interests, and mainly I've always liked the idea of making people laugh, and also doing things that people are like wouldn't expect and are outside the box. I remember when I was younger, and I was like 18, my first ever job was I worked as I had a sandwich board on in Leicester Square, because it was like when I went up like a job site to see what jobs were available, that sounded like the most interesting and the funnest job that you could have. It wasn't in the end, but it just kind of was indicative of I've always had a bit of wouldn't it be fun if I did this or if I tried this?
Let's talk about your gracious feat to get your dream job, which included printing your CV to the rooftop of your car. Tell me about that.
I mean, do you know what, David? It's actually so funny because today I have had news on that exact video. So initially, so this is about 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. I need to look up the date of the video, but because I had worked in hospital radio for a long time, I'd done student radio. I had always seen Radio 1 as this kind of big pinnacle, this North Star for me in the radio world, and it is for so many people. And so I thought, right, I need to get the attention of the big bosses there. So what I did is I printed my entire CV on the roof of my car, and parked it outside of the BBC offices to try and get their attention. It very much did get their attention. They did see it. They didn't give me a job, unfortunately. And what I got out of it was that they invited me to their festival that Radio 1 has called Big Weekend. But I did actually have a call with the head of Radio 1, a guy called Alan Hayden-Jones. And literally this morning, so funny you should say, literally this morning, I got an email from Radio 1 asking whether I wanted to do a show on Christmas Day. So I'm going to be doing my own show on Radio 1 2.5 years after I did that particular stunt and got a bit of press about it. I have been asked to say that please do not print your CV on your car in parks outside Radio 1. They are sick of people doing that. So just as anyone's listening, they're thinking of doing it, please do not.
One of the things I loved about that video was, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that you said that you create your own luck. And I've heard you on other podcasts where you talk about your kind of privately educated background, and a lot of podcast hosts kind of dive really deep into that. I'm sure you're probably sick of kind of talking about that. But one thing that I love about that statement, creating your own luck, is it mirrors the very equality of YouTube, where it doesn't matter what background you come from or what resources you might have or who you know in terms of your family dynamics, whether there's no nepotism really in the YouTube game.
I think I was talking to someone about this today. It is such a meritocratic platform. Is YouTube and social media in general. It genuinely is whoever's creating the best content or is getting the content that's been watched the most will be pushed the most. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm in a much luckier position than a lot of other people, in the fact that I could chase my dreams. I could spend 6 months to a year, whilst I was at university, making videos and working hard and doing that. But I kind of saw that is how YouTube works. And I thought, right, I just need to make the best videos that people are going to want to watch. And hopefully, and luckily I've had people who are watching the vids.
And as cliched as it is, like, ideas are free. And I recently saw that Mr. Beast is on track to become like the first YouTube millionaire. I saw that he was, billionaire after his feature in Forbes. But he literally started, one of his like famous videos is like talking to something like, it's like counting to something like 100,000 in a video. Like, I could do that, you could do that, anyone could do a video like that and create capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be, he's not just going to be a billionaire. That guy is going to, he's already had an offer for his channels for $1 billion. I think he'll be multi-billionaire. And that's the same to go with KSI and Logan Paul and creators in the creator economy now. Like, there is a shift towards huge business where previously there wasn't. And I think creators are going to start to be taken a lot more seriously in the years to come. And ideas are free. I think it's quite easy to look at Mr. Beast and think, oh, that idea, I can't be Mr. Beast because it's too expensive. It's too expensive to make videos. And money genuinely does not like make or break a good or bad idea. A good or bad idea is a good or bad idea. I'm just trying to think. There are so many videos on my channel that I made for absolutely £0 that ended up being incredibly well for me. For example, a video idea where I legally became the richest man in the world. I started a company. I issued, I think it was 10 billion shares in that company, and I sold one share on the street to someone for £50. And therefore I was worth 500 billion. That video got 7-8 million views, and it cost me absolutely nothing to make. So it's the beauty of YouTube again. It is all about the ideas. Now, don't get me wrong, ideas are so hard to come by and they take a long time to come up with, but it is just a fantastic world where you can just turn something around just like that.
I love it, Max. And on the contrary, have you ever had an idea that you've pumped a huge amount of capital into and it's flopped in comparison to and to others?
Yeah, I mean, actually, like one I did recently. I went to I did a video where I spent 24 hours with an actual elephant in the room, and that was that. I flew to India and I literally lived with an elephant for 24 hours. That comparatively, look, I spent a lot of money on that video, and it hasn't comparatively done as well, and that's okay. That's a part of the game, and there are times where I spent hours and hours on a video that just never come through. Like I've had a video idea for years where I want to water ski behind a cruise ship. And I have spent hours talking to cruise companies, putting together decks, doing risk assessments, talking to stunt coordinators and paying for advice. And it hasn't been possible just yet, but I know that it will happen at some point.
Do you have a set process of vetting your ideas that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just as simple as what's the title, and does that title get you excited? And does that title tell the story of the video? And does it ask questions? You want to intrigue a viewer. You don't want to confuse them, and that's very, very important. So when I'm thinking of concept ideas, I think, right, okay, this title. So if I take one from earlier this year, I became the world's richest man for 7 minutes. Like, you immediately are like, okay, how? That doesn't, okay. And also the 7 minutes there really, really helps, because if it was I became the world's richest man, that's not that interesting, because you obviously know that it's a lie. But it's I became the world's richest man for 7 minutes. You're like, what does that mean? Why is the 7 minutes important? So I'm always thinking with the video ideas, what is the title? And if the title isn't good enough, then I'm scrapping the video idea, because ultimately the most important thing is you get people to walk through the door, get the click, and then you can wow them with a brilliant video. There's no point in even starting the process if you don't think you're confident that someone is going to press the button and get them through the door.
Am I right in saying you became a member of the royal family as well?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So we had an idea where we knew that the Royal Jubilee was coming up. This was this summer, the 70th Jubilee for Queen Elizabeth II. And we thought, okay, how could I do a video that was about the royal family? And we came up with the idea of marrying into the royal family. And I did some digging about royalty and realized that actually the lineage of the royal family is just kind of like janky and skewed, and that people have married here and then it's gone down certain lines. It's not a straight line. So I thought, well, if I could find a descendant of somebody who was a king hundreds of years ago and married them, they've got royal blood, they're related to the royal family, therefore I would be in the royal family. So I found a guy from Edinburgh. He was at Edinburgh Uni. He's a 19-year-old lad, and we got married for a bit, and then we tried to get it annulled, but I realized you couldn't get annulments on homosexual marriages, and so I had to have a bit of an issue with a lawyer, with a with a divorce lawyer, so we could get divorced. But we did get married.
I didn't realize that last part about the annulment.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Yeah. That last bit was a bit of a tricky element to the whole thing. But we did do it in the video, but it was a bit of a tricky one.
So is your husband with you today on cam?
No, I haven't seen my husband since the marriage. So we are happily divorced now, I'm pleased to say.
Max, I need to talk about the Gatwick Airport prank.
Yes, welcome to
Can we
Luton.
talk about that? Yeah, can we talk about that and the repercussions of that?
Sure. I made a video where I wrote a sign that said "Welcome to Luton" in massive letters right next to Gatwick Airport, which is not Luton Airport. And so the idea was that as people were flying into land from their holidays, for a moment they'd think they landed in the wrong place, and it worked. I had a few rather panicked tweets being like, "Oh my god, have we just landed at the wrong place?" But ultimately, it was just kind of a bit of fun, and we managed to convince the landowner. So it was on private land, so we were allowed to do it. I bought the land for 6 weeks to able to do it at great expense. And then I remember I had to fly from Heathrow to Gatwick via Amsterdam to look at the handiwork. So I put it up on the ground, but I didn't know what it looked like from the air. So I flew into Gatwick, sat on the correct side of the plane, and saw it. I thought it was great. And then as I got to passport control, they asked me where I'd come from, and I was like, "I've just come from Heathrow." And they're like, "What? That doesn't make sense." So obviously, when I was in Amsterdam, I didn't get stamped, so it showed that I just left Heathrow and landed at Gatwick. And I told them what I'd done up the road, and she kind of smiled at me wryly and was like, "Oh, you naughty boy," and then stamped my passport and then let me through. So there were no repercussions at all, I think, other than people just quite enjoyed it. And it was kind of, but that's an example of that's not a new idea. Like that was being done by a guy in Australia. He's done Welcome to Perth, and he lives in Melbourne. A guy in America is Welcome to Cleveland. He lives in Missouri, I think. And it's just a perfect example of like there's ideas can be replicated, but as long as you add your little spin to them to make them yours rather than just directly copying.
I really think that's the definition of creativity: taking something that already exists and bending it.
Yeah, because you know that people like that. People enjoy what they know, really. So if you think of like crime dramas, like it's always really the same kind of format. You always have the person who gets found out at the end, who is the good guy, who we always thought was the good guy. It's the same in TV and movies. We know what we like, and so adapting YouTube videos that already exist to basically something that is a bit more me is a big part of the idea process.
I'm going to be really cheeky and try and get 2 more questions out of you before you go.
Sure. I might be quite quick with the answers, but yeah.
But that's okay, my friend. How do you escape what could turn into like almost like a hedonistic treadmill? You're constantly looking for bigger and better stunts to pull. How do you remove yourself from giving yourself a hard time when you can't fulfill a next step?
I haven't found out the answer to that question, genuinely, David. Like, I don't know. And I think the answer is to almost automate it, to make it more like work. Because my name's on the tin, essentially, there is so much that's entrenched in kind of my ideas of self-worth. So when videos do well, it's like, oh, well done, I've done well, therefore I've done a good job. But it is ultimately the downfall of most creators, of all YouTubers, because you have to constantly feed this beast and give it more and more content. And the most successful ones are the ones that are able to kind of automate that process and put things in place where people can take care of that whilst they remain the creative drive behind it. But I'm only as good as my last video, which is incredible, which is really, really scary. But I think 2023 is going to be something that I'm going to really try and focus on as to how I can become a more sustainable creator, I think, purely for my own mental health.
I can imagine. That leads me to my final question. What is your why? There's so much risk attached to what you do, both in terms of reputation, capital, and I guess legal at the same time. So some of the stunts you do are very, very on the borderline almost. Why do you do what you do? Why do you take on that risk?
Why not? Genuinely, why not? I think the legal side of things, I've got a good team around me of family and friends, and also kind of professional friends as well, who I can say, where do you think this sits on the line? It's important to listen to people, and when they say no, I think that's too far. But one of my whys, the reason my why is why not, and that started from, I remember talking to television, like TV producers, like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was pitching these ideas for TV shows, and they were all saying no, I don't know, and they asked me, they will ask me that question, it's like, why would we make this? What are we saying here? And I said, well, I think it's just, why not? There is this. I think there's a desire to give an explanation as to why we make a piece of content, or why someone makes some music and try to say a bigger picture. But I really find it quite refreshing to do something for the sake of doing it, for a good story, so that people can, a bit of levity. Like, there was no bigger meaning as to why I wrote Welcome to Luton next to Gatwick Airport. I did it because I just thought that people might enjoy it. It might give them a bit of a chuckle when they saw it. And that's what I thought was most important.
And similarly, I was inspired by your endeavor into stand-up comedy. I work in a corporate career, very kind of regulated industry that is very sense-making, and I started a stand-up comedy course and did my first gig last week.
Mate, well done. How did it go?
I loved it. I've got the bug. I'm going to do way more.
Mate,
maybe one day I'll perform at the Clapham Common just like you, mate.
Absolutely, mate. Come on down. It's genuinely, stand-up it's scary, but you just have to do it 5 minutes at a time, and there is no shortcut to stand-up. Like, there is absolutely no shortcut. It's purely about just putting the hours in on stage and kind of getting as good as you possibly can be, just through by repetition.
Mate, I'm going to take that lesson on. I'm coming down to London on Monday. I'm going to try and find an open night and
do it.
Perform that, mate. Thank you for your time. I know it's been scarce. Thank you for all the amazing work that you've put into the world, and thank you for giving my sister and I such happy times at home watching your videos, mate. This has been an honour.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, David. Speak to you in a bit.
Thanks, Max.
Cheers, buddy.